You don't belong in this building anymore.
She did not look at him. She pressed the elevator button, waited, got in, and went upstairs to begin her shift. She was the first person in the building every morning and the last one to leave at night. For 22 years, she emptied the trash, restocked the supply rooms, and quietly fixed whatever broke, including the people nobody else noticed were breaking. She never asked for a promotion. She never complained about her uniform. She never once raised her voice. And on a Tuesday morning in November, the new CEO of a Fortune 500 company walked past her in the lobby, looked her up and down, and said the 7 words that would destroy his career before the week was out. You don't belong in this building anymore. Her name was Gloria Reyes. His name doesn't matter yet. But by Friday, it would be on every business news channel in the country. And not for the reason he expected. Stay with me. Because what Gloria did next didn't involve screaming or crying or running to a lawyer. What she did was so quiet, so precise, and so completely unexpected that the people who watched it happen still can't fully explain how one woman dismantled an entire empire just by finally deciding to let the truth be seen. Before we go further, I need to tell you something. This is not a story about revenge. I know it looks like one. But by the time we get to the end, and I promise, you need to get to the end, you'll understand why what Gloria did was something far more powerful than revenge. This is a story about what happens when someone who has been invisible for 22 years finally allows themselves to be seen. And it is a story about what the people who underestimated her, and there were many, discovered when they realized too late exactly who they had been dismissing. The details in this story are inspired by real events. The names have been changed. But the truth at the center of it, that part is completely real. Let's go back to the beginning. Gloria Reyes started working at Meridian Group in the fall, not as a cleaner by accident, but by choice. She was 31 years old. She had a degree in business administration from a small university in Texas, 2 years of corporate HR experience, and a 3-year-old daughter named Sophia, who had just been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition that would require constant specialist care. The treatment wasn't covered by her previous employer's insurance plan. Meridian Group's janitorial contract, through an outsourced facilities company, came with full medical coverage, the best she could find. And so Gloria Reyes took the job. She told herself it was temporary, 2 years, maybe 3, just until Sophia was stable. Sophia stabilized, but the bills did not stop, and Gloria stayed. She learned the rhythms of the building, the way you only can when you are invisible to the people inside it. She knew which executives stayed late on Thursdays and why. She knew which conference room had a mold problem the building manager had been burying in reports for 6 years. She knew the name of every single employee on all 14 floors, not from a directory, but because she had handed each of them their forgotten badge or signed for package at one time or another. She also quietly started noticing things. Meridian Group sold infrastructure consulting services. Their biggest client, a state transportation authority, represented 38% of the company's annual revenue. Gloria had spent 6 years cleaning the office of the lead partner on that account, a man named Raymond Chu, and in that time she had, without intending to, absorbed more about Meridian's business than most of its mid-level managers. Not because she snooped. Because Raymond Chu thought she was furniture. He took calls on speakerphone with her in the room. He left sensitive documents on his desk while she worked around him. He once dictated an entire acquisition memo while she was replacing the trash liner 3 feet away. She never used any of it. It wasn't hers to use. But she remembered. For 22 years, Gloria Reyes cleaned and listened and remembered and said nothing. She raised Sophia, who was now healthy and 25 years old and working as a data analyst in Austin. She bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood. She was by any external measure unremarkable. Then the new CEO arrived. His name was Donovan Blake, and he had been hired from outside. Parachuted in by a board of directors convinced that Meridian needed new energy. He was 43, MBA from Wharton, profile in 3 magazines in his first month. He wore his confidence like a second suit. In his first week, he ordered a full operational audit. In his second week, he announced a restructure. In his third week, he walked through the lobby on a Monday morning and saw Gloria pushing a supply cart toward the service elevator. She was wearing her standard uniform, clean, pressed, as it had been every day for 22 years. He stopped. He actually stopped walking, turned to the building operations director beside him and said, loud enough that the 3 people in the lobby heard every word, "Why is someone like that coming through the main entrance?" There's a service entrance for a reason. This is a professional environment. Get this sorted. Gloria did not stop pushing her cart. She did not look at him. She pressed the elevator button, waited, got in, and went upstairs to begin her shift. That evening, she received a formal notice from the outsourced facilities company. Effective immediately, all janitorial staff were to use only the service entrance and service elevator. No exceptions. Policy directive from Meridian Group executive leadership. Gloria read the notice, folded it, and placed it in her drawer. Then she made a phone call. The person she called was not a lawyer. It was not a journalist. It was not a union representative. It was her daughter, Sophia. "It's time," Gloria said. Sophia said, "Are you sure?" Gloria looked at the folded notice on her kitchen table. 22 years is enough. Sophia said, "Okay, I'll start tonight." Neither of them said anything else. They had been preparing for this conversation, in small ways, in half-spoken pieces, for almost a decade. They both knew what it meant. Gloria had not simply been cleaning and listening all those years. She had also been building. 14 years ago, Gloria had started investing. Not in stocks, not in index funds, though she had those too. She had started investing in a small property in the same neighborhood where Meridian Group was located. Then a second one. Then, through a shell LLC registered in her daughter's name, not for deception but for privacy, which she had learned from years of watching men use the same structures to protect their wealth. A third. By the time Donovan Blake walked past her in the lobby, Gloria Reyes owned 6 commercial properties within a 4-block radius of Meridian Group's headquarters, including the building Meridian Group's headquarters was in. Not the whole building. A 34% ownership stake in the holding company that owned the building, enough to hold a seat on the property management board she had never once exercised. She had never needed to. The lease Meridian signed was airtight. The rent was fair. The relationship was clean. Gloria was a passive investor whose name appeared in legal filings that no one at Meridian had ever bothered to read all the way to the end. But that was only the first piece. The second piece was a consulting firm. 11 years ago, Gloria had registered a small advisory company under the name RG Strategic Consulting. She had used the business administration degree she'd never quite put away, and the 22 years of deeply specific, deeply unglamorous knowledge she had accumulated cleaning floors and emptying trash cans in a Fortune 500 company. She knew every client relationship, every internal tension, every buried operational problem Meridian had failed to fix across 2 decades. She had watched 3 CEOs come and go. She had absorbed the business as completely as any partner, more completely, because partners had agendas that filtered what they saw. Gloria had no agenda. She just saw clearly. RG Strategic had 4 clients. They were quiet. One of them, as of 8 months ago, was the State Transportation Authority, Meridian's largest account, not as a competing firm, as a secondary advisor on a separate infrastructure modernization initiative. She had taken no Meridian business. She had broken no rules. She had done nothing that any reasonable person could describe as wrong. But she was, in the cleanest possible sense, positioned. And then there was the third piece, the one that had taken the longest. For 7 years, Gloria had been keeping records. Not stolen documents. Not intercepted communications. Just notes, dates and times and overheard fragments, written each evening in a notebook she kept in her bedside drawer. The kind of record a careful, observant person keeps when they have been told, not in words, but in every single interaction, that they do not matter and what they witness does not count. The mold report buried 6 years ago. The HR complaints she had watched be quietly reassigned out of the company by an operations manager who was later promoted. The client meeting where a senior partner had said something about the Transportation Authority contract that, if accurate, suggested the bid process had not been entirely above board. She had never done anything with these records. Until now. The day after the service entrance directive, Gloria submitted her resignation from the facilities company. She walked into the Meridian Group lobby one final time. Through the main entrance, unhurried, left a sealed envelope with the front desk addressed to Donovan Blake personally, and walked out. The envelope contained 2 things: a single page, typed, and a business card. The page read, "Mr. Blake, I have worked in this building for 22 years. I have always entered through the main entrance. I resign this morning. The card enclosed is for your board of directors. I would recommend they call before end of week. G. Reyes." The business card was for RG Strategic Consulting. On the back in Gloria's handwriting, "I own 34% of this building. I thought you should know." Donovan Blake read both items at 9:15 a.m., By 9:45, he had Googled her name. By 10:30, he was on the phone with Meridian's general counsel. By noon, Raymond Chu, the lead partner whose speakerphone calls Gloria had absorbed for 6 years, had gone very, very quiet in his corner office. Because Raymond Chu knew things that Donovan Blake did not. He knew exactly how much Gloria Reyes had heard, and he had spent 6 years trusting that it would never matter. The board meeting was called for Thursday. Gloria did not attend. She had no obligation to. She was an investor, not an employee, not a plaintiff, not a whistleblower. She sent her attorney, a quiet woman named Helen Park, who specialized in commercial property and had been Gloria's personal counsel for 9 years. Helen Park walked into the Meridian Group boardroom on Thursday morning and placed 3 folders on the table. The first folder contained documentation of RG Strategic Consulting's advisory contract with the Transportation Authority and a clean legal opinion confirming there was no conflict of interest. The second folder contained a request, not a demand, not a lawsuit, a politely worded request, that the board commission an independent review of the buried mold reports, the reassigned HR complaints, and the bid process documentation from the Transportation Authority contract. The third folder contained Gloria's notes, 7 years of notes, dated, consistent, unremarkable in tone, the handwriting of a woman who was simply recording what she witnessed, with no commentary, no editorializing, no apparent awareness that any of it would ever be significant. They were, the board's outside counsel later said, the most quietly devastating documents she had ever seen in a conference room. Donovan Blake sat at the head of the table and said nothing. Raymond Chu asked to be excused to make a phone call. He was politely told that no one would be excused. Helen Park waited until the room finished reading. Then she said, "My client has no interest in public litigation. She has no interest in the press. She has no interest in making any of this difficult. What she does have an interest in is the following." She produced a fourth document, a proposal. It was clean. It was fair. It was the kind of proposal that only someone who had spent 2 decades watching a company operate from the inside, watching what it needed, watching what it wasted, watching the gap between what it claimed to be and what it actually was, could have written. It proposed a formal operational partnership between RG Strategic and Meridian Group, a restructured facilities contract with direct employment for building services staff, no outsourcing, full benefits, fair wages, a compliance review conducted by an independent firm of the board's choosing, and a formal acknowledgement, internal only, of the service entrance policy and its retraction. Nothing public, nothing punitive, nothing that would appear in a headline, just accountability. Handled quietly, the way Gloria had always done things. The board took 40 minutes to deliberate. They accepted every term. Donovan Blake tendered his resignation 2 weeks later. A mutual separation, the press release said, to pursue other opportunities. The real reason never appeared in any publication. Raymond Chu retired at the end of the quarter. He did not receive his full exit package. The details of why were subject to a confidential agreement that all parties signed. Gloria Reyes' name appeared in no article, no report, no press release. She did not want it to. A few weeks after the board meeting, Gloria drove back to the building, not to walk through the lobby, not to make a point. She drove to the service entrance. She parked her car and sat there for a while, looking at the door she had used 1,000 times. The one she had been ordered to use exclusively. The one that, in its own small way, had told her for 2 decades exactly how certain people saw her. Then she drove around to the main entrance, parked, walked through the front door, and rode the elevator to the 14th floor. The operations director, a woman named Linda Marsh, who had enforced the service entrance directive with visible discomfort, was at her desk. Gloria said, "I wanted to thank you." Not sarcastically. "I know you were doing what you were told. That matters." Linda looked at her for a long moment and then said, very quietly, "You were always the most professional person in this building. I want you to know that I knew that." Gloria nodded. "I know you knew. That's why I wanted to say it." She left. That was the entirety of her return. Sophia asked her later, "Do you feel like you won?" Gloria thought about this for longer than Sophia expected. "No," she finally said. "Winning would have meant I had to fight. I wasn't fighting. I was just, finally, letting myself take up space." Sophia said, "And how does that feel?" Gloria looked out the window at nothing in particular. Exactly like it should have felt 22 years ago. She smiled. Better late than never. There is a particular kind of person that the world has always underestimated. Not the loud person, not the obvious threat, Not the one with the expensive suit or the sharp elbows or the constant need to remind you who they are. The quiet one. The one who shows up every day without fanfare, without complaint, without making their worth known in ways the room is prepared to receive. The ones who are told, in 1,000 small and large ways, that they do not belong in the same space as the people they are serving. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, those people have been building something. Not because they planned revenge. Not because they were playing a long game. But because they understood something that the people looking past them never quite grasped. The value you bring does not disappear because someone fails to see it. It just waits. Gloria Reyes is not a billionaire. She is not a celebrity. She is a woman in her 50s who owns 6 commercial properties, runs a modest consulting firm, has a healthy daughter she is fiercely proud of, and eats breakfast every Saturday at the same small diner she has been going to for 15 years. The waitress there calls her by her first name. She tips 30% every time, without being asked. She knows what it means when the work you do makes someone's life easier, and nobody says, "Thank you." She decided, a long time ago, to be the kind of person who says it anyway. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs it, not someone who needs to be warned, someone who needs to be reminded. The quiet ones are always watching, and sometimes they have been building the whole time.
There is nothing quite like a peaceful